Today we're going to talk about the rise, fall, and rise again of one of the world's most prolific music artists, Kanye West. Hey, what's up, everybody? It's FLF here. Today we're going to be diving into a topic that I know a lot of people have been having questions about, and I'm excited to get into it and really look at the details of this person and this career and this enigma that is Kanye West. So before we dive in, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe if you're not already, and hit the bell for notifications. Just want to make sure as many people as possible can see this and that we can get this information out there. I think it's going to be really valuable, and I'm excited to give this kind of nuanced Christian worldview of this particular artist and why I think we should all be paying attention not only to Kanye West and the music and art and things that he produces, but also all artists and all musicians across the whole spectrum. When it comes to Kanye West, he's really a unique artist in the sense that he kind of transcends music in a lot of ways. And when you look at his career and what he's done and how he's impacted the culture, it's been really significant. Looking over the last 10, 20 years, I would probably say there's not too many artists or any artists potentially that have had the impact that Kanye West has had on the culture. You might have him rubbing shoulders with certain artists like Drake, for example, or Jay-Z, but the reality is that Kanye West in so many ways transcends them, even as artists, business people, creatives overall. He's really been one of the most profound and influential people in culture really for like the last 20 years. Aside from his music catalog, which people can hotly contest that he has one of the greatest music catalogs, at least on this side of like pop and hip hop music. His net worth currently is $6.6 billion. He has this massive deal with Gap. The Yeezy brand is pretty well known, especially with the Adidas shoes that he releases. Pretty much everything that he's been touching in recent years has been turning to gold. And this is despite maybe some really bizarre views that people would try to get him canceled for, wearing the red Trump hat, coming out against abortion, running for president. In light of all these things, Kanye West is still Kanye West. On top of that, he's married to Kim Kardashian, and the Kardashian family is one of the most high net worth families probably in the United States alone. So again, just when you look at his life, who he's connected with, the influences, he's really, again, one of the most influential people in this side of the decade. And with all of that, being one of the most wealthy black men, if not the wealthiest black man in all of U.S. history, being one of the most prolific music artists of all time, having an international fashion presence with his brand, being married to one of the most high net worth families in the U.S., he is also a Christian. And I think that's really, for a lot of people, the sticking point where they draw a lot of contention from, both good and bad. What I wanted to do in this video was really look at the reasons why people are skeptical of Kanye West and the things that he does, and also the reasons that we shouldn't be skeptical of the things that he does. I'm not the Kanye West expert. I can't give you every detail and nuance of his life, but I am very tied into who he is as an artist and as a person. I've been following his music for a number of years, and I think one of the things that has always stuck with me is that he is somebody who speaks his mind. He is somebody who is not controlled for the most part, I think, outwardly by a lot of people. I think he has a mind of his own. I think he does things that he wants to do, whether those things are good or bad. So when I see his life and I see his story and his trajectory, I think that there's a really awesome depiction of what the Christian life looks like, and oftentimes what Christians from the outside looking in can miss out on. All of these little details that comprise who he is as a person, his music, his life, his family, everything that goes into him, I think can often get sometimes blurred when you look at it through the lens of mainstream media or remove all the nuance that happens behind the scenes that people don't really know about. I'm not coming here to be a Kanye West apologist. I definitely have some very heavy critiques of him, but I think the one thing I do want to kind of hit on is not only who he is as an artist, but who he is as a Christian and his Christian journey. A lot of people would probably argue that he's a fake Christian, that he's not a real Christian. And even more recently, he's been on stage with Justin Bieber and Marilyn Manson and Roddy Ricch at these different church services and doing a lot of things that seem kind of bizarre, which we'll get into in part 2. But in part 1, I really want to just lay the base foundation and tell this story of who Kanye West is and then where he's at now. So without further ado, let's dive in. I think the first question that we should really address is, why are so many Christians skeptical right now, not even of the past, but right now, of Kanye West and his testimony, and if he's a genuine professed Christian follower of Christ. What I want to do to kind of kick this off is look at a couple of verses, a couple of scriptures in the Bible. The first one I want to look at is Galatians. Galatians 5:22 through 24. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such there is no law. And those who are of Christ have crucified the flesh with its passions and its desires. I think probably the biggest thing people will say is look at the fruit of his life. When you look at the things that are surrounding Kanye West, at times it can be very tough to tie that into the fruits of the Spirit, which we see manifest made by those followers of Christ who surrender their lives to Christ and pursue him with a passionate vigor, right? They want to really just connect with Christ, and as a result of that, those fruits are produced. Also, I want to look at Matthew 7:15 through 20. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Even so, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Therefore, by their fruits shall you know them. I think there's also a lot of fear and skepticism around Kanye West because people are afraid that he might be a false prophet of some kind. When you have people that are elevated on the level that he's elevated, have achieved the things that he's achieved, there's this very heavy caution that comes with believing that they are not being influenced by all these other forces of nature or these other forces in the world. When you think about, especially on this channel, when I talk about really upper echelon artists and creatives and musicians and business people, oftentimes I'm associating them directly with occultic practices, Freemasonry. You'll hear the word Illuminati thrown around. And I think that's a valid point to be made, is that when you look at some of these figures that come into Christianity and you pull back the veil and reveal who they are, you want to be as cautious as possible. And I think when we see certain things that he does or certain things that are happening, we kind of have those alarm bells go off. And I think when you have someone like Ravi Zacharias, who was outed more or less as a sexual predator, despite a history of ministry, it really puts people on edge to say, okay, I don't want to embrace this guy too much. I don't want to embrace his music too much, his culture too much, because he could be a wolf in sheep's clothing. And to be honest, I respect that position a lot. And I'm in that camp as well. My wife is in that camp. We want to be cautious of anyone who we're giving our time, money, and energy to. But again, I'm going to make the case for why we maybe should be skeptical and why we probably shouldn't be skeptical, and really what that means. When the Donda album dropped, you had people jumping left and right saying this is like a mass ritual, there's all kinds of crazy stuff going on, and I really could have taken advantage of that hype. I think in a lot of ways made a video, try to point out some things that seemed kind of off, and gotten a lot of YouTube views or a lot of views on TikTok. But when I watched it and I stood back with very clear eyes, I didn't see anything that was incredibly alarming, just to be 100% honest. And I'm going to cover some of that in part 2, and maybe things that stand out or things that might be confused or might be alarming, and really give Donda a fair shot. But as we look historically at Kanye West's career, there are moments and times where there are incredibly satanic and occultic and Luciferian type images and videos and music that's being put out. And we can't gloss over that. We have to treat it for what it is. And as we kind of go through this, I want to make sure I hit on that very clearly and plainly. So with that, let's kick off. I think the best place to start is Kanye West's music catalog. So Kanye West got his start as actually a music producer. For many of you probably know this. He was producing songs for Beanie Sigel, Dead Prez, and I think probably what launched him really into this path of superstardom or to release music is that he produced for Jay-Z. Now, Kanye West produced some really notable songs for Jay-Z, and I think it's important that we highlight that because these are very important songs. One song in particular that he was a co-producer on was HOVA. So this is a song that Jay-Z released called Hova. Now, when you look at the song, it's really clear from a Christian standpoint that Jay-Z is calling himself Jehovah or Jehovah, which is the name of God in the Bible. We often see Jehovah used throughout the Bible. Some Hebrew Israelites might argue that that is not how you pronounce it. I understand where you're coming from. Common translation, that's what people think, right? So Jehovah, Jay-Z's calling himself Jehovah. Kanye West is helping produce this record. That might be a red flag right there, right? Just the fact that Jay-Z's producing this song, Kanye West is being involved in that production. I think one of the main songs that kind of kicked it up a notch and was one of his most highly acclaimed songs and most widely spread songs was actually a song that he was featured on called Lucifer. Now, crazy, right? People don't really realize this, but on Jay-Z's Black album, Kanye West actually produced a song with Jay-Z called Lucifer. On the song, it's chanting, "Lucifer, son of the morning, I'm gonna take you out of her." Kanye West and Jay-Z both rapping on it. The content's, somewhere in the line between kind of creepy and regular. But the point is, he actually is producing this song that has that title on it. And this is right before he actually drops his own album, College Dropout. What's interesting about this timeline is that he produces the song with Jay-Z, gets into this car accident, gets his face wired shut, and that's where you see his first single, Through the Wire, come through. And this is where the College Dropout kind of leads up and is released. One of the interesting things I really want to point out here is that College Dropout was a standout album for a lot of reasons. It was kind of the birth of backpack rap for a number of different reasons. The way that it was produced was really well. And yeah, songs like Through the Wire, you can hear him kind of attributing his life being saved to God. And one of the most powerful things on Through the Wire, on College Dropout, is that he makes a song called Jesus Walks. Now, for anyone who knows Kanye West, Jesus Walks was one of Kanye West's most controversial, most push songs, where he's saying on the song, I can make a song about anything, but I can't make a song about Jesus. They won't play my song on the radio if I talk about Jesus. Really interesting. And Kanye West was so convicted by this song that he actually spent his own money to produce 3 different videos for the song because he wanted to tell the story really correctly. When I saw that, and I mean, at the time I was just a kid, but when I saw that, I was like, whoa, that's pretty crazy. This guy's talking about Jesus. He wasn't like a Christian rapper. I didn't know what Christian rap even was, but I knew that this artist on the mainstream was talking about Jesus, and that really hit me in a profound way. And even looking back, it's kind of like Kanye West's roots really started from a Christian standpoint. Obviously, you can imagine the gospel influence. His mother was very close to the church. So when you see all that, it's kind of like, okay, how does the story transition in the way that it does? The following 2 albums are great albums, but there's nothing incredibly bizarre about them or creepy about them or occultic about them. It's just Kanye West making money. If you want to be really critical, he has some songs like Gold Digger, which, I mean, could be taken a certain way. The New Workout Plan. I mean, these are like generally not healthy sexual songs, right? Like maybe songs I wouldn't necessarily let my kid listen to, but I wouldn't feel like any sort of like demonic oppression by listening to them, right? There's this kind of line where music can be, I think, bad for you, but not evil. And I feel like Kanye West was right on that line for a long time. And even some of his songs were very positive, very uplifting, and would call back to God and call back to Jesus in different ways. Now, what's important to note at this point is that Kanye West, after releasing 3 albums, this is around the time when his mother also passes away. So Graduation drops, and 2 months later, his mother passes away. The way that his mother passed away, the details are kind of foggy around it from what I was able to look up, but essentially she went in to get some plastic surgery done, and the surgeon or the anesthesiologist botched it and she passed away. Now, for me, when I look at Kanye West's life, outside looking in, I'm not his friend, I don't have all the details, but to me that is obviously a significant event, but I think it's the event that also kind of started this descent into a really dark place for him. And anyone can kind of assume that, but you start seeing his music transition from, College Dropout, Late Registration, Graduation into 808s and Heartbreaks. And 808s and Heartbreaks is kind of like the first step. I remember listening to this album and seeing some of the media that went along with it. It was kind of the first step into this weird place with Kanye West as the content got a lot darker, a lot stranger, a lot creepier. And in particular, I think to me was kind of like a very chilling version of Kanye West. Now, on the actual album, there's 2 songs that stand out, Coldest Winter and See You in My Nightmares. But See You in My Nightmares, with Lil Wayne being featured on it, Lil Wayne, who's been a predominantly occult artist for a long time, those 2 songs in particular have very eerie, creepy themes about losing love, losing a loved one, and obviously he could be talking about his fiance, how they split, his mother. A lot was happening for him. But one of the creepiest things for me is that when Kanye West actually dropped this album, he also came out with a music video, or not a music video, a short film called We Were Once in a Fairy Tale. I'll summarize it the best that I can, but essentially Kanye West goes to a party, he's drunk, he's like talking to people, making kind of a fool of himself. He has this hallucination where he's sleeping with a woman to find out he's not actually sleeping with a woman. Then he goes into the bathroom and he takes out a knife, cuts his stomach open, pulls out a small little mouse-looking creature who's connected to him via an umbilical cord. He cuts the cord, and then he essentially tells the little mouse to kill itself. Now, I mean, explaining it sounds really funny almost, but when you watch it, it's a very creepy kind of short film, and you feel a darkness about it. You feel like he's lost in so many ways. And the interesting part is that when he takes this little mouse out, it feels, and when I was watching this at the time, I was just, I don't know, maybe 17, 18, something like that. When I was watching at the time, I was like, is he taking out his soul? Like, is he saying that his soul is no longer with him? Like, what is he implying here? And there's only so much you could read into it, but I'm not really looking to pull symbolism. I'm more so saying this was a dark theme for a dark album, and it ended in a really bizarre way. Now you skip ahead to his next album, and this is really, I think, where the story gets bizarre. So the album following 808s and Heartbreaks, as many people know, is one of his most acclaimed albums called My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy had so many elements to it that screamed about the occult. This is really where I stopped listening to Kanye West entirely. And even outside of being a professed Christian, the content for me, while I hadn't accepted Christ as my savior at that point, the content to me was so blatantly evil and occultic that I couldn't just listen to it. I just felt I just couldn't listen to it. I was kind of in this place where I would listen to certain music and would avoid certain music, but there were certain artists like Jay-Z or DMX or Kanye West that I knew just too much about, and I just could not listen to it. I felt too much of a conviction for it. In hindsight, it was the Holy Spirit protecting me from that. But My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy stands out for a number of reasons. The lead single off of My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy was a song called Power. Now, as we go through the lyrics of the song, I think that's a kind of a good place to start. The lyrics of the song alone have very profound impact and are speaking to very specific points in Earth's history and talking, I truly believe, about God's judgment at the second coming of Christ. On the chorus, he says, "No one man should have all that power. The clock is ticking, I'm just count the hours. Until then, I'm tripping off the power. Until then, the world is ours." And I think I might have even misquoted that a little bit. But essentially, he's saying, no one man should have all that power. The clock is counting down. Until then, I'm going to trip off of this power, and the world is ours. And again, a lot of very creepy themes. And even the producer who actually produced the album, S1, kind of spoke about, you know, the creation process and kind of how he felt after that was released. S1 also being a Christian himself. But when you go through the actual album, you have songs like Power. You have songs like Devil in a New Dress. You have songs like Hell of a Life. You have songs like Monster. And looking even just at the lyrics of these songs, you have some really profound things happening in them. The music video for Power was also really monumental as well, because it was, again, another really well-produced music video from that standpoint, but featured a lot of really compelling imagery that you can tie directly into the occult. One thing that's notable is that throughout the entire promotion process of this album, Kanye West was seen adorned with a giant Horus headpiece. Now, if you're familiar with ancient Egypt, Horus, I believe, whenever somebody talks about that all-seeing eye, it's the eye of Horus. The eye of Horus is the all-seeing eye that can see everything. It's that Egyptian-looking eye that you see so frequently in these music videos and in these occult videos, and even on like the dollar bill, for example, that all-seeing eye. He was adorned with that in the video as well. And as the video kind of pans out, you see him between two Masonic pillars, which is very striking. And then next to those two pillars, two, I would say, demons with horns on their head and a sun disk in between their horns. Again, a call back to ancient Egypt, where they had profound sun worship, and they would put that sun disk between their heads and between the horns on their heads, these ox horns. As you pan out further in the video, you see a lot of really crazy imagery. You know, again, very well produced. This is a very well produced video, but at the very end, there's a flash, and not only do you see a Masonic symbol, but you see it right with Kanye West in the middle of it. And even so, as he's panning out, you see the sword of Damocles hanging above his head, which again is another callback to kind of that Greco-Roman paganism that we see so heavily tied into all of his music videos. Outside of that, the song Monster, where he has Jay-Z and Nicki Minaj on it, I mean, the music video is very disturbing. It has people essentially killing someone, eating their flesh in a zombie theme. Jay-Z's rapping at one point with a dead body of a woman laying on a couch in the background. And the whole song is talking about how they're so evil and how they are monsters in and of themselves. On the song Devil in a New Dress, aside from all the somewhat questionable lyrics, there's literally a part in the song where he chants the name of Satan 3 times. And again, it's just, why is he doing this? How far is he pushing this boundary? You see these themes recurring through all the music. On his song Hell of a Life, I really have to blur out the lyrics, but he makes a lot of very blasphemous statements in the song as well, where he's talking about women in a derogatory way, talking about religion in a derogatory way. And yeah, another example where he says, we have a hell of a life, almost saying that the way that they're living is either going to lead them to hell or is hell in the literal sense. So again, not anything that we saw from College Dropout, not anything we saw from Late Registration, Graduation, and maybe a glimpse of it in 808s and Heartbreak, but really Kanye West took this dark turn with this content and the things he was talking about, and maybe even the way that he was living at that point in time. Probably the most significant thing about this actual project, from an occult standpoint, as far as like the image and the visuals and the things like that, was the music video, or again the short film for Runaway. So he actually created a short film called Runaway, and I'll give a synopsis of what this is about, but it ties in with his cover art. So on the cover, Kanye West had brought in Virgil Abloh, I believe, to commission the artwork for the project. And on the cover, it's actually a picture of a demonic-looking, possessed Kanye West having sex with a phoenix, what I would say a fallen angel. That's what it looks like to me. It was graphic enough that they had to blur it for the actual album release, but the short film actually dives into that story a little bit more. So you essentially have Kanye West driving on this road in the middle of nowhere. An angel, or they call it a phoenix, but an angel, I would say, fallen angel, falls out of the sky and goes into a relationship with Kanye West, whose name is Griffin in the actual film. They start sleeping together. They're in this relationship. Everyone is talking about how this phoenix or this creature really shouldn't be with him. It's just kind of like this bizarre love story, essentially, of Kanye West with this phoenix. And there's even a point in time where he's producing music off of his MPC, and then the phoenix starts dancing, and it's like he's producing music to make the phoenix dance. The short film ends in a really weird way, where this phoenix says, I don't want to be a part of your world. I'm going to go into the sky and burst into flames. They sleep together again, and then he wakes up in the morning. She had run off. He chases her down but can't get her, and she bursts into flames. There's so much that goes into that, but you kind of have to acknowledge the imagery off the bat. Kanye West is in a relationship with the fallen angel, who he is producing music for, who everyone is telling him to get away from, but he doesn't want to get away from. And again, remind of all those themes that are in his songs throughout the entire project. And I think probably one of the biggest takeaways for me is just seeing that album artwork. It's a pretty disturbing album artwork from that artist that produced it. I forget his name. I believe Condor was his name, George Kondo. I'd have to maybe put in a little asterisk to make sure. But essentially, you're seeing this story unfold of Kanye West, I believe in so many ways, in a relationship with maybe not Lucifer, but a demon of some sort. And again, you have that call back to the album title, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. And this is indeed an album that I think calls out to that quite a bit. While the ascent further continues, on Kanye West's next album, Yeezus, we see a lot of these very similar themes rear their head again on this project. So the actual album title, Yeezus, is, very blatant, and I think has already been reviewed by other people. Yeezus is literally a play off of Jesus. And what you see on this album quite a bit is that Kanye West is equating himself to a deity. He's equating himself in so many ways right up to Jesus or right up to God. Even on the tour, when they were actually going on tour, there was multiple times when he would have Jesus come out on stage as a part of the performance, and he would argue with Jesus and say, why? And then Jesus would say, come back to me, Kanye West, this white guy playing Jesus. And they would argue back and forth while he's on tour, which I think is kind of an interesting thing. When you kind of look at the turmoil of his life and what he was going through, you can imagine that there was this inner struggle going on. You even had moments on tour where he was doing kind of mock religious or church celebrations with nuns and holding up a cross and holding up a pope-like cross, and he was kind of like the officiator or the priest of the entire ceremony. Which again, whenever you take a Christian symbol or a religious symbol and you misappropriate it or you pervert it in some way, that's really blasphemous, depending on which culture it is. So when I see that, I think of it's blasphemy. I don't really think of it as an artistic liberty or creative expression. To me, that's just straight up blasphemy. And some people could argue with me on that, but from a Christian worldview, that is what it is. And especially with him having Jesus come out and kind of talk to him, there's just an element about it that is really bizarre and really esoteric in that sense. On top of that, the original cover art for Yeezus, again, Yeezus comparing himself to Jesus, was a Jesus piece that had been melted down on the cover. And again, it kind of ties into that idea of, oh, I can melt down this Jesus piece and I can become like Jesus. I can become Yeezus. And even for the promotion of the new single, New Slaves, for the album, the New Slaves was actually projected onto buildings as part of the promo, and they had the song going, and it was like filmed and released and presented to media. But they filmed that on 66 different buildings in 66 different cities across 6 countries. So you see that theme of 666 coming in. And this might be a situation where people are trying to be provocative, and the promo is really trying to drive people to look into things. And I think that's potential here, but you just see that common theme, very dark theme, esoteric meanings, trying to equate himself with God, going down this dark path. And remind you again, this is all kicked off, I believe, by the passing of his mother. His mother was the rock in his life. His mother was his connection to God in many respects. And once his mother was gone, that thing that was keeping him grounded, keeping him rooted, you kind of see Kanye West get taken by the world, I would say. When you look at the people around him in these different situations, while I said, before that I think Kanye West is someone who speaks his mind, someone who doesn't care, someone who will come out and say what he wants to say, I think he did have silent hands in his life kind of leading him what to do, leading him where to go, leading him what to say. And I think that's, again, revealed here in a lot of ways, just based on kind of his reaction to certain things. If you recall the Breakfast Club episode, or how he yelled at Sway, I think that iconic Sway in the Morning clip where he's yelling, "How Sway, how Sway," all kind of stemmed from this time period where he was in a dark place. And I think his music expressed it. I think his attitude expressed it. And ultimately, I think that dark place is not by mistake. I think he was led to produce this content, this really dark, I would say, evil content. Now, right after Yeezus, I think we start seeing what I would say the rise. Initially, Kanye West coming to fame and fruition, college dropout, graduation. The fall, I'm talking more about his spiritual life, because he was a very successful music artist for this time. But the fall spiritually was music content getting very dark. And then the rise again, I think we see that on The Life of Pablo. So I remember The Life of Pablo coming out, and it was one of the few albums that I was really excited about, because there were some elements that had been revealed that when he chose the name The Life of Pablo, he was talking about the life of Paul in the Bible. So Paul is an apostle who was previously named Saul, who was a persecutor of Christians, but he actually had an encounter with Christ, and his life changed around, and he got a brand new name in the name of Paul. So when I heard that, I was like, okay, something might be happening here. Something incredible might be happening here. Christ might be moving in a major way in his life. And he had been doing the Sunday services, I believe, at this time. He had been working with artists like Chance the Rapper, for example, and Chance the Rapper had been coming out as a professed Christian. And then we got a glimpse of Ultra Light Beam, which was the intro track for his album. Didn't have any cursing on it. Featured Kirk Franklin, who's a prolific gospel producer, and then Chance the Rapper, just all about God. It was a very beautiful thing. And then, of course, the album being called The Life of Pablo, who was talking about St. Paul. Now, when I look at everything else that kind of led up to it, there were some interesting things happening. But one, he got placed into a mental institute. He started adorning the red Trump hat, the MAGA hat, going at people about it. He started being really outspoken on a lot of things that I feel people try to cancel him for. And then this album comes out. Now, mind you, he said it was a Christian album with some cursing in it, and I don't think it was a Christian album at all. But what I noticed is that there was a common theme where he was going back to God. He was kind of getting back to his roots. Now, this could be for a number of reasons. He had been married. He had his children. His children were growing up. Maybe he was coming into a new phase of fatherhood. But you started to see a lot of these things that I believe were kind of tethering him previously break away. I don't think that just because he's supporting Trump, he was a Christian or something like that, or, that he's making Christian music that okay, he got the thumbs up for me. That's not what I'm saying at all. I think more so when he was putting on the red hat, when he was trying to meet with Trump, when he was speaking out against abortion and different things, when he was doing these radio interviews, what stood out to me is that these are things that are not with the common narrative. These are things that his peers were not doing. And these are things that if his peers did, they would receive the backlash for. So when I saw Kanye West moving in this way, what stuck out to me is, okay, if he was being moved or controlled with the silent hand before, he's not being moved with the silent hand right now. Everything he's doing is coming straight out of Kanye West. So that was exciting for me because I'm seeing, okay, this is an organic kind of thing that's happening. And when you make a song like Ultralight Beam that has very heavy Christian themes, has the type of artists and people featured on it, when you see these Sunday services popping up, that gave me a lot of hope. And even though I didn't enjoy the album, and even though the content was kind of lousy at some points, you do see a renewal of the Holy Spirit working in Kanye West's life in a major way. Now, of course, I just want to run through these next two projects pretty quickly because we have a limited amount of time and I want to make a part 2. But right after Life of Pablo, Kanye West drops Yay, which is kind of like an ode to, you know, maybe his experience going to the hospital and his experience with bipolar and being very transparent. He also drops a joint project with Kid Cudi called Kids See Ghosts. He produces Pusha T's album. He produces Tiana Taylor's album. But when he came out with these different projects, again, you were seeing glimpses of hope, glimpses of renewal, glimpses of purity. On the Kids See Ghost album, he had a song called Reborn, which felt so pure and it made you want to rejoice. And like the final song, the Cudi montage, you have Kid Cudi kind of crying out, I think, for a lot of ways for God, and you have Kanye West right there with him. And I remember just praying for them after hearing that because I was like, wow, the Lord is really moving in a mighty way in their lives. Now, fast forward a couple of years from there, and then you have Jesus is King. You have Kanye West's official first Christian project. Now, there was a lot that led up to this. There was Kanye West putting on the Sunday services more and more frequently. There was him performing. There was his interview with David Letterman on Netflix. There was his performance at Coachella, again, alongside Kid Cudi and different artists. There was a lot of steps that happened, but finally you saw Kanye West come out and literally, in a very public, in a very sincere, and in a very genuine way, accept Christ as a savior. And I think that was, for me, the most powerful thing. When you look at Jesus as King as a project, I was, again, very skeptical leading up to it, but Jesus is King as a project literally has all of the trademarks and footholds that I would expect from a Christian project. There wasn't any cussing. God was glorified on literally every song. He featured Christian artists. He took all the people that would have been cussing and said, you can't cuss, I believe. And he created a beautiful piece of content for the Lord. And on top of that, he released the Sunday Service album as well. Around Christmas time that same year in 2019. You just saw for what it was that this was a genuine profession of faith. Every interview that he did, he talked about how Jesus Christ was his king. He talked about his stances against certain things like abortion, his stances on voting, his stances on Republicans versus Democrats. You just saw a very honest and transparent version of Kanye West coming out. And I still think that's carrying through to today, even with Donda and even with the other things that he's been doing. But I think for me, that was like a profound moment in Kanye West's history, so to speak, where you saw the genuineness of a Christian experience come to fruition. And you got to imagine there's thousands, if not millions of people praying for him in these different points in his life. And finally, God was able to bring him together. You saw him going to church services. You saw him bringing in pastors to speak. A lot of artists or people, when they get newly saved, they feel like they have to preach. No, he brought in his own pastor that he had been working with, who's a sound man of faith. I think when we look at the story of Kanye West and we kind of summarize this part 1, I absolutely believe that Kanye West is genuine about his Christian faith. I absolutely think that we'll see him in the kingdom of heaven. And I absolutely think that he's trying to do everything that he possibly can to let his light shine to the glory of Christ. Along the way, there were some bumps, and I think even now there's some bumps, and I'm going to cover all that in part 2 and cover Donda as well. But I think what we ultimately have to look at is the fruits. Again, if we're calling back to Galatians and Matthew 7, do they bear good fruits? Do they bear bad fruits? Because a bad tree can't bear good fruit, and a good fruit can't bear bad fruit. A good tree can't bear bad fruit. So ultimately, I'm looking at his life, the things that he's doing, his actions, and everyone falls, everyone makes mistakes. But was his conversion experience genuine? I absolutely believe so. And I think even now he's living out that experience right in front of us. So thank you everybody so much for your time today, going through this part 1 of Kanye West. I'm going to try and do part 2 pretty soon and get that out. I really want to dive into Donda. I really want to dive into the Drink Champs interview, his interview with Joe Rogan, and cover these different areas. But again, if you enjoyed the content, be sure to hit that like, hit the subscribe, the bell for notifications. I have merch in the description you can always support the channel with. I appreciate your time more than anything else. But I pray that you receive a blessing from this and that you could share this with somebody else who might be confused about this topic or might be looking to find answers. But again, thank you so much for your time. Again, my name's FLF, and God bless, and let's light up Babylon.